Welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones. I am a certified personal trainer, and I'm here to help you achieve your fitness goals without pain. In each episode, I'll share tips and strategies that will help you stay safe and pain-free while you're working out. I'll also interview experts in the field of fitness and pain management. So if you're ready to learn how to stay active and pain-free, then subscribe to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones, and today I am joined by Katie Rothwell. She is a leading chronic pain specialist and founder of the Beat Pain Method. After her own journey with debilitating back pain and a career change from the Royal Air Force, she became passionate about helping others overcome persistent pain. She now combines neuroscience, movement, nutrition, and hands-on therapy to empower people to live pain-free and active lives. Katie, welcome to the show. I'm so excited.
Thanks so much for having me, Dana.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about you and what inspired your approach.
So as you said, I've come at this from my own back pain story, but also I kind of always wanted to be a physiotherapist and ended up doing sports science and physiology at uni. So I've always had an interest in the body. I was a physical education officer in the RAF, so enjoyed making sure people were fit and healthy to go off and fight and running circuit sessions and adventurous training and hiking. So I was always pretty active. And then soon after the birth of my first child, I got hit with this back pain, and it really brought me down because I thought, how on earth am I going to do my job? And how on earth am I going to be the mum that I want to be? And was told, oh, it's degenerative disc disease, and yeah, you're probably going to have to just live with it. And I was like, what? So basically, everything that I've put together in the Beat Pain approach is come about from everything that's worked for me, but also since leaving the RAF, I trained in sports massage and craniosacral therapy. And so I've been treating clients for about 12 years, and I've started to kind of learn what works, what doesn't work, and kind of being the guinea pig myself and trying things out. And then realized that actually everything in the Beat Pain and the 4 pillars is what helps. There's no kind of one thing that fixes chronic pain. And I think when you go to the doctors, they kind of put you in a box and go, okay, well, you've got degenerative disc disease. This is the treatment, have these drugs. Whereas I find when people come to me, I could have 5 people with back pain, but the cause is so different. Like one might be nutrition, one might be stress or fear of movement or past emotions, whatever. There's so many different causes. And that's what I found working with people and myself, that actually you've got to take a tailored approach. So yeah, I've put everything that I learned and experienced myself into the Beat Pain approach.
That's great. So what exactly is BEAT?
So BEAT stands for Brain, Energy, Activity and Therapy. So the brain element encompasses pain education, the neuroscience of pain, the understanding the mind-body connection, the calming down the nervous system, because as you know, with chronic pain, we have this like oversensitized nervous system. So that is all encompassed in the B element, the brain element of BEAT. The E is sleep and nutrition. So I advise people on how to eat an anti-inflammatory diet, what they need to cut out, what they need to add in. And then we also look at sleep hygiene and how they can optimize natural sleep. I think with a lot of people that are suffering with pain, they tend to rely on those sedative drugs maybe, or even alcohol to kind of get them off to sleep. But that actually is just kind of knocking you out for a few hours and allowing those hours to pass by. Whereas if we can optimize natural sleep, then that's where healing's going to be optimized as well. So that's the energy bit, the E. So that's nutrition and sleep. Then the A is activity. So I'm a Pilates instructor. And as I said, I'm an ex-Royal Air Force physical education officer. I'm also ex-PE teacher as well. So I've got quite a good knowledge of exercises and stuff. So I tend to prescribe certain exercises to people, but also using Pilates as an approach and trying to get them to move gradually out of that fear of pain, but within that window of tolerance that we're not going to flare up pain, even if it's just getting them out of an armchair, using the breath in Pilates and control and everything. So that all comes under the A element. And then the T is the therapy. So as I said, I've done sports massage and craniosacral therapy. So that's my hands-on approach. But you can also have just such a therapeutic effect online just by listening and understanding and giving tools, especially tools that from the SERPA approach, and just being that kind of empathetic ear to hear people out, because I think so often people don't feel heard when they've got chronic pain. So that's the T element, the therapy element.
You had mentioned that your back pain had surfaced after having a child. How does Beat work with busy moms? Because you're not the first person who has said that to me. There have been quite a few moms that have, as soon as they have that first child, or as they're anticipating the birth of the first child or second child, I guess it doesn't matter which one, but there's a tremendous amount of stress. And then that's usually when their chronic pain conditions get exacerbated. So how does Beat work with that?
So the joy of Beat is it can be done online, from the comfort of your own home. And I remember when I had my first child and my husband was serving abroad, so I was solo parenting, and I was trying to get physio appointments, osteopath appointments, etc. And I'm having to take child with me all the time, and it's trying to kind of tailor those appointments in with sleep time or in between feed and stuff. And it was so difficult. The one classic one was in the osteopath clinic, and my boy was sleeping in the buggy, and then sort of 45 minutes in to an hour's appointment, he woke up, and I thought, oh no, don't cut my appointment short, please. And his nappy just exploded, and I was like, oh my God, this is horrendous. So embarrassing. And all the treatment that I just had in that 45 minutes was just undone, because now my stress was just boom, straight away again. So the Beat pain can be done from home, from a time that suits you. I meet with my one-to-one clients, I meet them once a week for an hour's appointment with me, and I'm giving them sort of tools and things of what they need to think about each week. But I'm also available Monday to Friday at the end of a sort of text message or a little voice message or something. So I'm kind of there when you need me, but not so that you kind of have to worry about the schedule. There we go.
And this is total off question. Why are we embarrassed as mothers when something happens with our child? And again, it's not necessarily your expertise, but I find that it's so funny, because it's not like no child has ever blown out their diaper. It's not like they don't cry. But yet as mothers, we have this tremendous guilt and responsibility for an infant who is actually incapable of even knowing what they're feeling, except for some sort of discomfort. And they're expressing that, but yet we feel like we have to control this in public places.
Oh, yeah. This is a really good question. And I think when you become a mum, and I mean a mum, not a dad, there's this guilt fairy that's born and hangs on your shoulder, and it's just there all the time. And you think, am I doing a good enough job? Am I feeding this kid well enough? Am I nurturing this kid well enough? Am I disciplining this kid well enough? And everything kind of feeds back into that guilt. If you sit on the sofa for 5 minutes because you need a bit of a break, it's like, oh, I feel guilty because I should be doing that laundry or preparing dinner or whatever it might be. And I don't think guys get it. And I've learned, partly because of the SERPA approach, to try and manage that
Mm.
it's a bit of my self-care to kind of go, these things happen, it's out of my control, and I am doing a good job and being kind to myself, and um speaking kind words to myself. I do need a break. I need a break for the benefit of everyone else in the family. But I've only learnt that recently, and my kids are now 13 and 11. It's taken a long time. And I remember, like, I was trying to discipline them in the supermarket because they were just driving me nuts. And I thought, if I yell and shout, I'm going to be probably sort of people are going to have their own opinion of my parenting. And I thought, you know what, they're just having a toddler tantrum. So I just walked down the next aisle and I tried to just ignore it and just breathe and go, they'll get over it. They know where I am. And I had this parent come up to me and say, "Is that your child down that aisle?" I said, "Yeah." "But you can't see them." I said, "Yeah, I know, but I can hear them." And it's trying to sort of get over that everyone's watching me, how I parent. And it's really bad in the UK. I've lived abroad and it's not so bad, but I feel like there's this judgmental thing going
For
on.
sure.
But
It's
yeah,
in the United States too. And
yeah, I'm
it's funny
sure.
because, of course, I can't judge you because I know my kid's doing the same thing, and I think that's what's funny, and I don't, because I don't feel like it's necessarily people without children that are judging. I feel like it is other moms that are judging, and I know that your kid has thrown themselves on the ground and rolled around at some point or threw a fit because they didn't get candy at the checkout or whatever. That's why I guess I feel like, because we are a special pack, right? Moms are a special pack, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe we should look out better for one another.
Yeah,
Support each other because we know it's not easy, and you never know what somebody's coming in with. You never know how their day was and whether or not their child has been up all night because they've had colic, and you're dealing with a mom who's sleep deprived for how many days in a row, or if something happened to a family member and they're upset but they know they need to buy food for their child or something. It's amazing to me how much guilt and shame we hold on ourselves, and it's no surprise that that translates into some sort of chronic pain symptom.
yeah. And it's no surprise, is it, that chronic pain is more prevalent in females.
Yes.
And I think probably sort of middle-aged females, because I think when we have children and we're trying to hold down a career, we're trying to be the best person at the career, we're trying to be the best mum going, we're trying to be the best wife, and then you've got parents that are aging and they need your help as well. You're suddenly caught in this massive storm and you're trying to hold it all together.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had a client today and that was exactly what's going on with her, and she's trying to do everything, the perfectionist thing and the "I can't say no"
Right.
classic kind of personality, and it's like, do you know what? Just go home and just say kind words to yourself, because you're not speaking to yourself the way you would speak to other people. And I guess, like, I've been there where I was wanting to do everything perfectly, wanting to do a perfect dinner and give the perfect diet, and you're cursing yourself if you go and get a takeaway because you think, "Oh God, it's not good for them," and it's just impossible in the society that we live in now. It's impossible to do everything perfectly.
Yes.
So
For sure.
we all need to just cut each other a bit of slack.
That would be great. So you use many different techniques to help people recover from pain. And I love that because I know that after certain people read a book, they feel like I need to journal, or especially, and I know that I struggled with the manual therapy piece because it was such a part of the chronic pain storyline of going to the acupuncturist and going for massage and going for physical therapy and doing all those things. And I had to learn how to get back into that. How do you incorporate that manual therapy without triggering, I guess, desperation that we have that, oh, Katie rubs my calf, then my pain is going to go away, because that's the expectation is always there, right? Is that we do that therapy and we hope that that's going to be the thing. So how do you bridge that without it kind of throwing people back into their chronic pain ways?
So I think, what you mean by that question is with my hands-on clients, when I'm
Yes.
doing the massage and the cranial, and they can become very reliant on my treatments to help them. When they come in or when I've got a new client, I kind of highlight the fact that I am about education, and I am about giving you, the client, the knowledge and the tools of what you can do yourself. And I even call it homework. I say, right, here's your treatment. and then here's your homework. So off you go and do it. And so many clients don't, but they've got that option that they can do the homework and reduce their cost and time coming to me. And I have clients that kind of go, "Oh God, Katie, you've got such magic hands. How have you got magic hands?" And part of it is actually I'm really lucky to have an hour with someone, doctors, etc., that just don't have that time with a person. I've got an hour, and whilst they're lying on the couch, I'm not just doing hands on, I'm talking to them and I'm reassuring them and I'm educating them about the pain and saying, do you know what? You think you've got a slip disc, but here's the actual reality of pain. What's going on in your life? And we start chatting about that. And I had a guy who was, yeah, my wife's really poorly and I've got to look after her the whole time. And I said, and how's diet? And he's, oh wow, I like a beer and a takeaway in front of the football. And so then we get on to talking about exercise. So I kind of just drip feed it as they're lying on the couch getting the manual therapy. And with this particular guy, he came to me for a few manual therapy sessions, convinced he'd slipped a disc and could barely roll over on the couch. And he was better. He's like, I'm pain free. I'm not taking my drugs anymore. What did
Wow.
you do? And I said, I haven't, it's not so much my hands on, it's everything that you've done. You've started walking 10 minutes a day. You've improved your diet because you know why diet is important. I think we can all understand, yeah, I know how to eat a healthy diet, but until we understand that actual connection between diet and pain, and I explain that to them, that gut brain connection, then they kind of go, oh, okay. So yeah, it really does make a difference. And then they start to make more of an effort. And I've found that when people make the effort in that with their homework and then they feel a bit better, then they just want to do more of it. So
Yes.
it's sort of just drip feeding it without overwhelming them that this is everything you need to do. But then it's like, where do I start? So I kind of take where they're at with their symptoms and go, okay, I think maybe diet might be a good starting point, or exercise, or let's just talk about pain and the science behind it to reduce your fear because you're in this massive state of anxiety. So I kind of pick where I start on the beat pain approach and yeah, just talk to them whilst they're on the couch, really.
Fancy yourself a chronic pain detective?
I Yeah, I think so. Like you're asking those questions, aren't you, to try and identify whether it's like neuroplastic pain. And actually, as well, my hands do find the tight spots, and we hang out there for a bit and see if it means anything. Yeah, some of my clients are like, "How on earth do you find these tight spots? Because I didn't even know I was tight there." And I said, yeah, my hand's a bit like a metal detective. Trigger point.
I love that. The tension detector. There you go.
Yeah, tension detector, exactly. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you talked about that. And so are there any particular processes or pain researchers that you use their information to I know I think you and I previously had talked about Lorimer Moseley. Is there anyone else who may be like a favorite that you use to help with the education of your clients?
Yeah. So more recently I've done the SERPA training, which I think you've done as well,
Yes.
with Georgie, which is using the John Sarno mind body approach. And I'll sort of go back in my own pain story. So I was seeing an osteopath for my back, and he mentioned to me about Lorimer Moseley. And this would have been about probably 11 years ago.
Hmm.
And he said, you must just go and watch this TED talk from a chap called Lorimer Moseley. So I did. And I thought, okay, so this pain thing, it might just have nothing to do with my discs. And it's about the neuroscience. And that's what triggered me to kind of go down that route. And so I use a lot of his resources, like the danger in me's, the safety in me's. How can we reduce those danger in me's and increase the safeties in order to dampen down the nervous system response and reduce pain? I use that, and he talks about the three musketeers, like the immune system and the activity, and I'm just forgetting one at the minute, but how these three musketeers contribute to our experience of pain. And he's got some really, really great books that I use to help explain pain to clients. And I've done his explain pain course. And then I kind of went down the road of, so in craniosacral, we train in doing somatic emotional releases. So I'd read a lot about how nervous system can hold on to emotions, etc. And I'd said to this lady that was treating me, why am I not having an emotional release? I think I need an emotional release because that's what I've read about. And she said, well, your body's just not ready. And she was so right, because I was still in the thick of that stressful episode of my life. And I was still having to be that parent, and I was putting on a guard for the
Yes.
sake of my children. I felt like I was constantly acting. And so I wasn't in that safe space to release emotions. And it actually didn't happen until probably only a few years ago, when I was doing the cranial training for somatic emotional release. And in that training room, I had the most amazing emotional release with about two therapists working on me. My whole body went into shaking. I felt really cold. And through dialogue, what was coming out was the fact that I was feeling anger and resentment towards my husband when my back pain started. And I was
Mm.
like, whoa, I kind of knew I was feeling that, but I didn't want to feel that. And I couldn't admit to feeling that. But he was effectively going to war in Afghanistan. And I was also in the military, but I was back at home wiping nappies. And I was like, I've not trained for this. I've trained for that.
Right.
And there was
Yeah.
probably a bit of jealousy, and I wasn't coping as a solo parent. I wasn't getting the sleep. I didn't have family nearby, and I wasn't coping. And I remember my husband saying, "Come on, Katie, you're an officer in the Air Force. You can deal with this." I said, "Give me my office in the Air Force any day. This is hard." So I was sort of being harsh on myself for not coping, angry at him that he's buggered off to war, and
Just
and
playing.
this all came out in this session, and it was a big eye opener to me. I was like, wow, this mind body approach is real. I've read about it, and now I've experienced it. It is real. And then that's where I started going down the SERPA approach, and wanting to know more and more about it. And of course, the Howard Huberner and his books and podcasts as well, I find really enlightening. So yeah, those are the sort of, I guess, the gurus that I refer to.
Now, did you go back to your husband and have a conversation about your feelings?
Yeah. I said,
Okay.
guess what?
Well, I know some people
Guess what
make
just came out of my body, that I'm apparently angry and resentful towards you. No, he's an incredibly understanding guy, and he's like, "Oh, wow, that's really interesting." And, yeah, no, he was really accepting of it, and it was like, it yeah, it was I did a podcast, one of my first podcasts that I recorded, and I told this story, and it was, like, the first time I've told it publicly, and then he listened to the podcast, he's like, "Wow, I sound like a horrible husband." And I thought, "Oh, no, you've come across all wrong," because he's wonderful, but you just can't help the way you feel in certain scenarios, and that's why I bottled it up. That's why I
Yes.
repressed it, because society tells me I'm not allowed to feel angry and resentful towards a husband that's serving the country at war. He should be
Right.
proud of him and supportive, which I was, of course,
Yes.
but I can't help feeling those other emotions as well. But society maybe was making me repress them.
Well, and they're also your emotions.
Yeah.
So you're entitled to feel however you want to feel. And, he's a big boy, so I'm sure he's fine. You're still together. Everything's great.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just that moment. But it's always interesting because for me, my emotional release or whatever was leaky. So I would journal and I would cry, and it was odd because it would go in little spurts. And I think it's because there is a level of control that we do have as chronic pain sufferers, where we do know how to control our emotions, and we know that they may not come across well. And so you have to and I wanted so desperately to do the work because I did not want my head to keep banging. And so I think for me, it was just like spurting out so I'd have these moments. And it was also learning the skill of releasing the emotions in a healthy way, and then also going back and having those conversations so that I didn't continue the cycle of resentment. And that's important for a lot of people because I think they do think like, "Oh, I'm just gonna blow up. Everything's gonna come out. I'm gonna, touched by Jesus, I'm going to be healed and never have any more pain." And the reality is that life is there and things are going to come up, and your parents are going to get sick, and your job is going to become difficult, and your child may be difficult because of their grades or anything else. So, as my guard dog is paying
Mm.
attention to things. Anyway,
When
so
you
but
say when you say your emotion sort of control is leaky, does that mean you're sort of in control of it, and when you need to release a bit of emotion, you do, and you release it bit by bit? Is that
yes, so
Yeah,
you know how it's the pressure cooker?
yeah.
So I was just tipping the lid so that little bits would, because I also think that deep down inside, I was afraid of what would happen if I let loose a torrent of emotion.
Right. Oh,
And
okay.
so for me, it was that bit of letting a little out at a time, and it was different things. So the journaling would trigger one thing, maybe some somatic practice would trigger something different, or breathing would trigger, or whatever was coming along. Those different things were triggering these little mini releases. And I don't know if that was the right thing for me to do, but because I think I'm such a control freak, it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Now I'm at this point, 5.5 years into this work on myself. And so that just, as I wake up every day, there's new realizations of how to handle stuff. And of course, I wonder, like, what would happen if I just lost my mind and kicked the punch and freaked out about something and let it all fly at once? Like, how would my body would have interpreted it differently than now I did it? But I can't worry about that. I'm just going
Yeah,
forward.
I think our bodies are just incredible. And if you're worried about the sort of right or wrong way, the approach you're using, I think you've just got to trust the fact that your body's doing it right for you in the
Yes.
circumstance that you're in at the moment. Um, because this was it where I was like seeing this craniosacral, I was like, why aren't I having an emotional release? And she referred to me like an onion layer. Like I was in
Mm.
such uh I had my body armor up, like she couldn't get through at all because I was so stressed in the situation that we were in at the time. And then the situation eased a bit and she said, "Oh, I'm managing to get through those onion layers now." And I think, it's a matter of time, depending on my external situation as to when I would have the emotional release. So for you, I think probably that's your body's way of kind of going, okay, I know what I need to do. As you say, tipping the lid. I think that's a really like nice analogy because you don't, you're obviously not ready to have that full on release, and your body
Yes.
knows that.
Yes. So, and I wonder if that's, obviously, now that I'm having the realization after listening to you, I wonder if that's why symptoms still like linger a little bit, and whatever, and again, it's a work in progress and nothing's perfect. And, that's why I have these conversations, is because I know there's another Dana out there in the world that is
Yeah.
having similar symptoms and wanting to know why they didn't get the book cure, or why their x-ray doesn't match what their body is telling them what they're feeling. And the thing is that we're just all doing the best we can with the information that we have.
Yeah. And even if you're having these mini releases, that's your way of controlling and managing the pain.
Yes.
And it's what I say to clients, can you get rid of my pain? It's like, I don't know. I can't promise anything, but what I can promise is that I can maybe make you feel more in control of it. And and that sounds to me like what you're doing by tipping the lid. You're keeping everything under control.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This would be a great time for you to share another success story if you have a little bit. So,
Yeah.
some memorable case that you have, or, something that really shows like how the beat method worked for a particular client.
Yeah, I'm going to share the story of Claire because I know she won't mind me mentioning her because
Thank you, Claire.
she's one of my biggest advocates. I love her. And she was actually the first client that went through the actual beat pain approach a year ago when I first launched it. And I was a bit like, imposter syndrome. Is it going to work? And she asked me about the program, and I said, why don't you come and see me for hands-on and we can talk about it? And then I gave her the details. I said, why don't you go and think about it? And she went, I want to do your program. I was like, oh, okay. Okay, let's sign you up. And I was really nervous, but she was just brilliant. I mean, she came to me really at rock bottom, struggled to explain her story through tears. She had neuropathic pain down her legs, couldn't wear shoes, couldn't drive, was massively in a state of alert with her nervous system. And she had just experienced quite a big sort of life stress. And she had confidence in me. And I was like, amazing. So we worked through starting off with pain education, which immediately reduced her fear and anxiety. And again, at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is this going to work with neuropathic pain? I know it works for neuroplastic pain, but I thought, no, let's just go through the whole process. And we worked on diet as well. And she's the one that said, once you know why you're doing what you're doing and you start to feel better, you just want to do it more and more. So she completely changed her diet. She was going swimming. She completely embraced the whole journaling, and the weather was good because it was this time last year. It's May time. So she was sitting in her garden with her cats every morning, doing her journaling, listening to the birds, prioritizing herself. I mean, she was off work because of the pain. And then we finished the program and pain had massively reduced, and she was then moving house in with her boyfriend. I thought, oh God, this is like a massive life change again. And I was expecting flare ups, and she did have a little bit of a flare up, but not major. And I always do a inflammatory index questionnaire at the start of working with me. And it's just a questionnaire about how inflamed our body is. So it's questions like, do your ears feel sticky? Are your eyes itchy? Are you achy? Do you get headaches? Loads of things that you wouldn't even possibly associate with being inflamed. And then it gives you a score. Halfway through the program, she was having a bit of a wobble. And I said, look, let's just do this questionnaire again and see if we've made progress. And she'd like halved her inflammatory score. And she was like, oh my God. Because I think when you're day to day, you don't realize the progress you've made. And so that kind of spurred her on. And then at the end, we did another inflammatory questionnaire and she'd reduced it by 2/3. And then November, she messaged me and said, I'm at the hospital. And I'm thinking, oh no, what's happened? She goes, I've just had my checkup. The neuropathy has gone. And within 6 weeks as well, she was also back at work. She was driving and she got her life back. It was just amazing.
Hey,
And
Claire.
yeah, I'm just so delighted for her. And but she was like the perfect client. She just completely embraced everything I was telling her.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that because,
Yeah.
again, the more people that embrace this approach, I think it's better for all of us because then that helps spread the word. It changes practice, physician practice for sure. I'm starting to see it in the physical therapy world here in the United States.
That's good.
More physical therapists are starting to alter the way they treat patients, and they're starting to look for more of the neuroplastic symptoms and have better conversations with their clients as opposed to just saying, okay, your knee hurts, here are your exercises, here's copies, go practice and let me know if it hurts, kind of
Yeah.
thing. So I appreciate these types of moments because of the fact that it just really pushes the work out there further into the world. And yeah, we need
Can I share
advocates.
one more case
Sure.
study? I'm not going to name him because he has written me a testimonial, but he's still quite private. But he came to me, he's a young chap, really loving mountain biking and was unable to do his mountain biking because of unexplained pain in his sort of armpit rib area. And he'd had all these tests and they couldn't explain it. So the next step was to have an operation. And I was like, what? An operation when you don't know what's wrong? He was like, yeah, I think it's like an exploratory operation to see what's going on. I was like, wow, okay. And he says, I just want to try everything possible before that. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So he did my program. And when he started, the more you explain about the mind body approach and the pain education, the more that comes back and they go, oh, well, this has just happened. Could that be relevant? And he just split up with his girlfriend. And he was also with her when her father died. He was right next to her when she found out. So he was a massive shoulder to cry on. And then he was realizing that this relationship wasn't right for him, but he couldn't leave it because he felt guilty, because he felt that she needed him. So I was like, okay, so he's in a relationship that's not filling his bucket, not fulfilling him. And there's that guilt and everything that, we were talking about with mums and stuff. And I thought, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, this could be relevant. So we talked about journaling and, tuning into the pain, tuning into what he's feeling. He was already eating really well. He'd already seen a nutritionist, etc. And he did the 6 weeks with me. Again, we did the inflammatory questionnaire, and that was massively reduced by, again, about 2/3. And then with all the people that I'd been talking about at Christmas, he went and got all of those books. And 6 weeks into the new year, I messaged him just to see how he's getting on. And he said, oh, I've been reading all these books and I've got no pain. I'm back in the gym. I've gained muscle weight and I don't need an operation.
Fantastic.
So the beat pain for him kind of got him on that pathway. And then he went on that pathway on his own for a lot of it. But yeah, it was that realization that past experiences and emotions and everything were absolutely playing a part.
I can totally see that. Well, Katie, thank you so much for your time. How do we get in touch with you?
So I've got a website, which is www.katierothwell.co.uk. And on that, I've got a wellbeing hub with lots of blogs and Pilates videos and a few recipes, etc. So it's a nice area for free resources. I'm also on Instagram at beat_pain_now. And I'm also on Facebook, Beat Pain Therapy. I think it is, yeah. But I'll
We'll
let
have all that in the
know those. We'll put them in the
show
show
notes.
notes. So people have got that. I am also on LinkedIn just as Katie Rothwell. So yeah, lots of ways to get hold of me. And also my email is info@katierothwell.co.uk.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated chatting with you, and I think we need to do this again.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me on. I could talk about pain for hours.
Thank you.
Amazing.